So we are here. I'm delighted. Bruno, Anatxu, Anatxu, Bruno. Um, so I wanted to talk about the green lie, about the communication, about the quantification and the publicity around sustainability. Because this is where a lot of things go wrong. And I thought to get the things out in the open, it would be interesting to have a journalist from El País, who is somebody who has to explain complicated things to a very broad public, and whose words are read by people all around the world, the Spanish-speaking world, which is a lot. So it was clear to me I had to invite Anatxu, because Anatxu, I brief curriculum. She studied journalism in Barcelona, history of art in Chicago. And then she wrote many books like New Spanish Architecture, Las Casas del Siglo, Minimalisms. And now writing for leading newspaper El País. She's also a member of the specialist committee for the biannual Mies van der Rohe Award. And she has a blog, Del Tirador a la Ciudad. And there she covers design, architecture and planning issues. And last years also she dedicates quite a lot of her observations to the drastic changes that the profession of the architect is going through in Spain. And she focuses also in these themes on the sustainability and the social matters that are concerned. And I thought she should talk with Bruno. Because Bruno studied architecture in Antwerp, in Belgium. And then he came to Barcelona, started working with Felipe Pic Aguilera and Teresa Batlle, before going to Valencia. And there he founded Bipolaire and Partners, an architecture studio that does not only make projects, but also is very involved in investigation, in academic activities. So he is broadening the classical repertoire of the architect. He is also the technical director of the Green Building Council Spain, and that makes him co-responsible of the sustainability rating tool Verde, which is like the Spanish derivative of LEED, applicable to Spain only. We will talk about this. And in the upcoming Congress next October, he will be responsible for the sessions that will be dedicated to these rating tools, these quantification methods that are emerging all around the world. So I think the contraposition of somebody who works for a rigorous quantification, which is very academic, opposed to the vision of somebody who has to explain things in a very broad sense, should help us to get a grasp on the problem. And maybe I should start with that confession, Anatxu, that I wrote you in a mail. 3 years ago, Anatxu wrote on a project that we did with the office. It's a theater in Sant Andreu de la Barca. There was something with the theater that was good, but also I make quite some mistakes, I have to say, because you see the photovoltaic pergola, which I think fits really, really well. You have a plaza, you have a theater, and in between there's a terrace, which needs shadow, and we made the pergola. But when Anatxu saw the building, she asked me, okay, but this pergola, how many kilowatts and how many tons of CO2 emissions do you save from that? And I gave some numbers, and the numbers, they were like 30,000 kilowatts hour per year were saved, which were 60 dwellings, I said, and that is not true. Then suddenly I was talking about the equivalent of about 10 dwellings. So I have to apologize to Anatxu for making this kind of mistakes, and we do. She already forgave me. Now I will give Anatxu the opportunity to do an explanation that she prepared. Okay.
Okay, anyhow, I want to thank Roca Gallery and Arquitectos por la Arquitectura, Sander as well, Natalie and Nuria for organizing this Congress. I think it explains many things that maybe because it's raining as perhaps a consequence of what we are doing wrong, maybe because it could be considered a form of punishment or whatever, but see how many we are here. I mean, this is not something that really worries a lot of us, does it? And that's the first thing I wanted to say. I was very interested to hear Sander talking about the context, because me, being a journalist and writing, I've been writing for many years on architecture, and this is basically what I've been defending most of the time. Architecture is the only subject I know that has been explained in architecture schools without taking into account the context. I don't know any philologist or anyone who has studied, for example, literature, who knows nothing whatsoever about the life of, I don't know, Miguel de Cervantes. It is considered that knowing the life of the actors, of the main characters of your discipline, for example, enriches your knowledge of that discipline. And that's why I've always fought for the context. I've always tried to explain when and where and under what conditions things were happening, and who and perhaps why, whenever it was possible to explain why, things happened also throughout history. No? So the context for me is basic. Without context, there's no information. Facts are not information for us, right? So sustainability is something that, more than anything else, and generalizing and trying to summarize this, has become basic. Nacho, could you please get my images? Thank you, sorry. Has become basically a fashion. It was a fashion. And fashions are terribly dangerous in the newspaper business. Of course, as you know, the mere definition of what is a piece of news is what tomorrow, the English definition is what tomorrow will serve to wrap up the fish and chips. You know, that's the papers. What is new today is tomorrow will be wrapping the fish and chips. That means that what is news today cannot no longer be news tomorrow. So sustainability should never go into the news, into the newsroom, because, I mean, it shouldn't be considered as news. So the treatment, whatever, and if there has been a treatment in the newspaper, it has been wrong. It has been wrong because by making it a fashion, we have gotten used to it. We have gotten used to hear that this building is sustainable or bioclimatic or ecological, or all the adjectives that seem to be the same and were not really the same. So adjectives have been used by architects and also by journalists as if they meant very little. And if you use something as if it means very little, in the end, it ends up meaning very, very little, which is the case, I believe, these days. This is Jordi Badia's square in Badalona, near here. In my opinion, this is a very nice square. And it recovered the green that the hard Barcelona squares had lost for decades. It recovered the green. Of course, as you know, green needs time. Trees need, I would say, decades to grow. So in this case, green in the future can be shadow, can be something else. But to start, green many times has meant decoration. Green has been used basically as a fashion, has been used as a decoration, has been used as an excuse, has been used as a joke. This is a work by a Spanish architect called Beatriz Ramo, who lives in the Netherlands, and it's called Almighty Green. Of course, it's not existing. Has been used as a wrapping. It is very fashionable as well, without very truly knowing the implications of this wrapping. It looked very ecological, but vertical gardens look very, very ecological. If you go to Mexico DF, it's full of vertical gardens, only in very expensive buildings. And it's extremely unsustainable. And this, the one I just showed you is Jean Nouvel's in Paris, Quai de Brenly. It's very decorative as well. It has been used sometimes as a field for invention. This is Patrick Blanc vertical garden in Caixa Forum next to Herzog and de Meuron's. And this is a temporary vegetable garden in Berlin. They have been planted also in Madrid. This is another thing that we may talk about today. Green can be temporary. Green is temporary always. We understand, we think that nature has been virgin, but nature is no longer, nothing is any longer virgin in our planet. Green has good sides to it as well, can also be hopeful. Green agriculture brought into cities in La Habana or in London, for example, has become social. Many people coming from other countries have gone out of their homes to cultivate a garden, a vegetable garden, and by doing that, they have related to people from other communities. So it can become also a social tool, more than an ecological or sustainable tool. It can become a social tool. And of course, green can be a proof of cynicism. And this is, in my opinion, this case, and more than that, these are works by Emilio Ambas. I'm very upset with him because this is what he proposed to do in Castellana, to knock down a building, to build this right next to Caixa Forum, not to talk about the economical implications of this, but this is basically what he proposed for a city, Madrid, that is suffocated by sun and whatsoever. So green can also, and has been used as a proof of cynicism. Under the name of sustainability, well, this again, proof of cynicism, this is another work by Beatriz Ramo, making a joke and proving that vertical gardens really are nothing but a very expensive decoration. Beyond green, the word sustainability and the word ecology, this is the city of the sustainable city half built by Tuñón y Mansilla in Soria. Many millions were spent in this project. I think this is the project, and this is how it is today. Absolutely unsustainable, left as many things that are left unfinished, left with no future. See what happens with projects like this. The only aim as a citizen, as a journalist, I can think of when I see a project like this left unfinished is this one, which was the opening date. But I think for a performance like this, it's way too expensive to leave buildings, of course, unfinished. But it's even worse if you use them using the excuse of the sustainable. It's even worse. I think it should be punished. It should be judged. It should be known, at least. Also, these words that are equivalent to green, to sustainable, to ecological, to bioclimatic. I mean, we have so many smart cities as well. You can apply them to urbanism. You can apply them to architecture. These towers, for example, by Ábalos and Herreros, sometimes I cannot give numbers, but I can give names if you want, in Vitoria, were called, the name of the towers was bioclimatic towers. I went to visit them in April, and the air conditioning, Vitoria, north of Spain, the air conditioning was working. And I thought, what's bioclimatic here? I mean, the air condition, they needed to cool them, the inside, right?
Can they open the windows?
Yes, they can. They can.
They can open.
They can. It's social housing and offices, and it's the same design. So I asked Iñaki Ábalos, who's head at Harvard now, he's head of studies, and his answer, which was published in El País Semanal, was, well, at the time, they were very bioclimatical. So this is the architect's answer. These are, maybe they were called because they were at the end of the city, or they were called so in the hope that they would change things. I don't know. But these are facts. Another thing that I've seen by looking at architecture from a sustainable point of view, let's put it that way, is people trying to invent the ordinary. This is a project by Norman Foster, Masdar City, maybe you have heard of it. It's a ghetto, basically, a sustainable ghetto, as if sustainability could be dealt with in ghettos. I mean, as if what happens in Australia is not causing this rain, and so on and so forth, right? But anyhow, this is his project, Masdar City in Abu Dhabi, for 2,000 people. If we pay attention to Norman Foster's office designed for Masdar City, which was supposed to be the first city 100% sustainable with renewable energies and so on. What you see it there, and that's why I called it inventing the ordinary, is what we have in the traditional Mediterranean culture. Pergolas, I don't know how to say it in English, shadows. Pergolas, shadows,
Shading.
celosias, I don't know celosias either in English.
Sun shutters.
Sunshades. Well, basically a way of dealing with the sun, try to avoid the sun during the hot hours. This is under construction, or it should be. This is Masdar City under construction. And as you can see, I will try to be fast. As you saw it, I mean, it's just a ghetto. It cannot be named anything else. And as you see, it's nothing. This is again. Okay. Nothing that you are not aware of, nothing that very simple Mediterranean architects have not used before. What I like to pay attention is not only to traditions, because of course, if you are not sustainable, you are considered someone who is either very destructive or someone who is not updated. And particularly when you vindicate, as I just said, traditions like the sunshades and celosias, pergolas, so on, well, you are seen as someone who is not updated, who is not prepared to discuss what real problems are. So I was just, basically, I had a selection organized to show a few images of people who are dealing with the same problems and taking into account tradition, taking into account the knowledge that is already there, departing from what is already known. There have been projects, urbanistic projects, that have taken into account all those things that were a problem, for example, rivers in Spain, that were considered a problem, urbanistically a problem, have been solved. So this, I was just going to show you a couple of examples of how in the last decade, many Spanish rivers have become parks. And that is a way of dealing both with nature, in case the river grows, it's prepared, it's not built right next to the river. And on the other hand, so it's taking nature into account and it's giving the city a place for freedom, for recreation, for joy, for a park. The Madrid-Rio project, it's a huge example in this respect. And it's a huge example with a very, very tiny river. What is important for me about this project? Yes, what is important is this is the only spot where the whole avenue, I don't know how to call it, the whole path is interrupted. It's almost 8 kilometers of uninterrupted path for people to walk, for people to stroll. And what is fundamental is that it talks about something that I believe we should talk about when we talk about sustainability. And it is exactly the opposite to Norman Foster's project, is connectivity. What's happening in this city has an influence, has an effect in the city, in the neighbor next to this city. Unless we understand this, we won't go anywhere. This is how this idea of the aside the river, next to the river, has invaded, has colonized little by little the rest of the city. These are examples also in Portugal. I mean, it's not only in Spain, of the reconquering the river banks. Same thing, bringing the green, not as allied, but as something productive, in the same as I explained before, the social part of green, because I believe, well, repairing, reusing what is there, the power stations, Battersea Power Station in London, reusing what exists, and of course, being fully sustainable when building passive homes. These are Josep Bungesque passive homes. I don't know if you know his work, but it's absolutely, this house, which is his home in Lleida, generates or accumulates, more than generates, the energy it consumes. I've talked about all these projects in El País blog del Tirador a la Ciudad. And of course, this is the image that is the opposite to what I just showed you. But this is the image that gets to the papers, somehow representing what is bioclimatic or what is ecological or sustainable. This is the Mediatic building by Enric Ruiz-Geli. And when I asked him how much energy was saved, how much, 20%. I think something should be done, unless things are 100% or 90% or 80% or something. Something should be done not to be able to use these words when buildings are not really what they say they are. This is a problem they faced before in the food business. In the food business, you could say ecological, fresh, new, you could say whatever, until it was regulated. There is an urgent need for very clear and simple regulation for everyone to understand, because that's the way to avoid lying. Another way of making buildings sustainable is it has not to do with the greenwash, it has to do with the way we build, unfinished, very typical in many Latin American countries. Leave the place unfinished. Of course, it requires a lot of modesty on the part of architects to think that someone else is going to finish your work, but at least it's a home. It's your home, you finish it, regardless of what the architect tells you. Or the industrial, the other side of the industrial, how sustainable are buildings that you can place anywhere? That's another question. And yet, this is the last point I wanted to talk about, the social. Sander was talking. This is the Biblioteca España, built in Medellin, in Colombia. I think the building is probably absolutely unsustainable. It's an awful building inside. It's very dark. It's a library, and it's difficult to read, really. But it's a very important building for a Colonia Santo Domingo, for a mountain in the outskirts of the city. This is the place. Very sustainable, by the way. And what it did, that type of architecture, was to bring attention, international attention to that area, and by bringing international attention, made people feel proud of the area, take care of the area. So it's a way of education as well, connecting. One thing is connected to the other. I don't think we should talk about sustainability as an isolated matter. This is in Brazil. Colonia is called, funny enough, paradoxically enough, Paraisópolis. Paraisópolis is the largest favela in Sao Paulo. And this is very recent. This is from this year. Because what people have done is 8,000 people have just settled in the outskirts of this favela. But the favela itself, which is this one, this is not, this is Santa Barbara, is this one. So it has become a kind of a middle-class neighborhood in the city of Sao Paulo. As you know, Sao Paulo society is changing very rapidly because Sao Paulo, Brazilian society, quite a few of them are able to become middle class, what we're missing here, basically, middle class. And I think that's a basic step towards sustainability. There cannot be sustainability if we have no hope in the future. I mean, it makes no sense. Why would you take care of where you live if you are not sure if you're going to be able to live there? So basically, this is people getting organized, and this is the same. This is a very famous photograph you may know. The funny thing is that Parisopolis has a border as any other favela, and of course the land, because the land is cheaper, many people have no problem in buying an apartment there with larger spaces and a very social view. Let's call it a social view. The last point I wanted to make is this one. This is one of the very many theme parks, just like the Ciudad Sostenible de Soria that I told you about in the beginning. This was called el Reina de Don Quixote in Ciudad Real. 43 million euros were spent on a project that, to start with, imagine a medieval village for a piece of literature, El Quijote, that happened in the Renaissance. That was the beginning. And from that, now it's stopped. It's stopped. And what happens with that money? What happens with not only the money, but this was done near Tablas de Damiel, as you know, without taking into account the amount of water the theme park needed, and so on. So my question is, if we have a type of governors or government who approve this type of projects, how can we trust what they tell us, or how can we obey at home recycling with the very simple sustainable habits? How can we do that? What kind of message are they sending to us? And this is where I depart from. Sorry it took so long.
No. You're more than welcome. I'm going to try to get away, take out something. I think there's a nice bridge to what we should be talking about right now. This is yes, the frog. This is a restaurant on the beach in Doñana. Doñana is the park in Andalusia, natural park. And this was not allowed to be built because there are some environmental laws that oblige you to have a certain distance from the sea. This restaurant did not respect these laws, but anyhow, the owner managed to get it built, and once it was built, he knew that it might be interesting to get some sustainability award. And he did. Because what did he do? He used LED lighting. He used selective waste. He separates his plastics from his organics, and that's also very good. He had some smoke extractions, and with all these fantastic decisions that the architect and the manager made, they won a prize. They won a sustainability prize from, I don't know if this was the ministry. Yeah, this was the ministry. So, okay, we can expect anything from our administrations. I'm used to that, the governments. But what I find very interesting is somebody who decides to build over there still wants to get a sustainability prize. That he still thinks, okay, now I'm going to get that prize, and then that's marketing. He was really convinced of that this was the way to get some clients, I think.
Well, I think now up to me. Yeah. As you're looking to me. If you speak about prices and measuring sustainability and getting awards and all these things, effectively there is an aspect of marketing and commercialization in a certain way of what's our professional activity, which is design, which is building. And this is unacceptable. Okay, in a certain way, most of the established or the rating tools which are used nowadays for measuring or quantifying sustainability, the first aspect that they will take into account is where it is placed and if it is correctly placed. So the environment and the placement is a key indicator somewhere. So that shouldn't be even not a subject of being awarded or evaluated in a certain way. No? Besides of that, when Sander said some weeks ago through the email, look, maybe if you feel like giving some images, I said, no, I don't want to give images. And then it's funny in a certain way that Anatxu is saying, yeah, but many things are entering to the eyes of the people through the images, and that we're using them wrong in a certain way. So at the end, yes, you can put the first one. At the end, 2 days ago, I sent him late at night 8 images because I didn't want to have another profile. I mean, I had to do something. And if I know that, I mean, I'm expected on this moment in a certain way to defend what are rating tools and the importance of what is quantifying sustainability. And if I place it in a certain way in the context of where did they start and where are we now in this moment, and if it's really helping something towards sustainability, well, then I can give a dual answer. So I say yes, I mean, it was important and it is important, and I can say no, I mean, we're doing a big mistake. No? You say yes, because from the Club of Rome on 73, these industrials, they were measuring really what they were doing. And they made a conclusion, say, look, if we go on like this, with this rhythm, mainly based on demographic evolution, how many people are being born in the world, and what's the comfort that we should give them in the certain kind of a quality of life, then this is not sustainable. And then in the 80s, the first rating tool really appeared, I mean, BREEAM in this case. And you should know the basis of BREEAM. BREEAM is coming from a private enterprise, which is mainly dedicated to fire protection and security of health and work protection on the building site and all these things. And they want to also certify, it's the company of certifications. So they did everything except, on that moment, sustainability. So they said, we would like also to certify sustainability, which at the end is it's a nice objective, no? A nice aim in the beginning. But on the moment that this becomes linked with a strong commercial and market element, where I'm placed in the market, then there's a very dark side of certification and evaluation and indicators. On the moment that you start comparing and saying, look, I'm more sustainable than you are because I got more points in LEED and I'm better in BREEAM and I'm whatever, kind of 4 leaves in Verde or very good in DGNB instead of good, or the medals, or then it's not objective anymore. But you cannot compare the result of an office building in Barcelona with an office building in Sao Paulo using the same rating tool, which is LEED, for instance. I mean, then you're completely giving a wrong image of what or should be sustainability. You're taking it out of its context, out of its local conditions, and just start comparing. So, as I'm quite used to work with indicators, KPI sets and all these things because of my work in European project of investigation and with the Green Building Council, I know where the strong points are and where the weak points are. So in that sense, you may ask whatever you feel like, and we can enter a little bit into debate in these things. Me, myself, I built my own house during 7 years. Without a certain kind of act of sustainability, in the sense I would like to have the control on everything what enters over there and everything what goes out. and we produced exactly 1 container of leftover in the building site of 1 family of waste. So that is very few. We recuperated quite a lot. And I refused until now constantly to certify that house with indicators. No? So it's not that, I think there are good things to be said about the rating tools and the scientific part, but you were really interested in numbers, putting numbers on these things. But you have to be critical when you're working with it. The Congress that you mentioned at the end of this year, the Congress, the World Sustainable Building Congress in Barcelona, the main question, the first question that we said in Green Building Council was, did we go as fast as we could until now? Did we went far enough until where you could have gone in a certain way? And it's a tricky question in the sense that there is an answer included in the question, because we are clearly saying no. So generating a platform from Green Building Council on where we can debate, it will be about 2,000 people coming. We had 1,000 papers received, 800 papers will be, abstract will be turned into papers. Many discussions, 149 debates between 4 or 5 people. So it will be something really vibrant, but we are introducing consciously the opposite of what is the traditional rating tool philosophy. When we were showing the images of the favelas in Brazil, one of the questions that we set into the area of rating tools is that, please, can someone come and explain us if there exists a certain kind of LEED favela? Does it exist? How do you certify a LEED with LEED or whatever tool, a favela development? I mean, that just makes no sense. I mean, it would be interesting, but it will be very difficult. No? But that question is important if we start about thinking about it. So I brought some images very quickly. 2 images of 2 kinds of architecture, which would be very interesting to introduce them in a rating system, a rating tool, but it's not possible. I mean, in this case, Francis Quéré, what he's doing in South Africa, in his original village, working with the people for the village, using local materials mainly, very simple bioclimatical context. This, you cannot put it into a rating tool. That's impossible to certify. And then the second project is from Martin Rauch. He's from Austria, and he's working only with rammed earth. Rammed earth is not classified with a document that you can say in the rating system, this is my document and I prove that I am not emitting any CO2. So it's very difficult to introduce this kind of very interesting sustainable architecture into a rating system. So I'm criticizing it. But on the other hand, you can do with a rating system using the indicators as a design tool, as something you have in mind when you're designing, and doing very interesting projects without really having to give that commercial aspect to it. And then 2 second images, then the next images, there's one project at Sociopolis it's an urban project.
Yeah, it's down
lower.
here. Okay.
Sociopolis is I don't know if you know it, it's a project in Valencia where I'm living. I think it was developed 10 years ago, which is a completely disaster in this moment. And probably it's fulfilling most of the indicators of LEED neighborhoods or BREEAM communities, in which they were saying you have to participate with the people, you have to bring orchard fields into your urbanization, greening, this kind of houses, facades. And this would be probably Platino and LEED, and that's the image we have on this moment in Valencia, where they converted a virgin orchard field, natural area, into urbanization, completely out of context. So once again, that's a small critic, but if you go, for instance, to the BREEAM communities document and you use these indicators, they're very interesting ones. I mean, they really make you conscious and they indicate you where you can go. Or the next project of Renzo Piano, which is in a certain way considered in Europe or in the world as one of these green, sustainable architects, with his laboratory in Italy in Genoa, a very beautiful building, interesting investigation, research, and all those things. And probably he did some very interesting projects, but this is completely, for me, this is ununderstandable, saying that this could be a sustainable building. No? So in that sense, probably also one of these buildings can be perfectly very well in BREEAM or LEED Platino. No?
If I may interrupt, I mean, we're also discussing because we have the format of a conversation because we can interrupt. Eh?
Yes, you can interrupt perfectly.
And the public can
They
also
should,
interrupt. This was LEED.
Yes.
I don't know if it's silver. It's LEED silver. It is at the Plaza Europa. It is a building by RSR. And yeah, once you know the trick.
Yeah, it's easy
well,
to do.
in Spanish they say hecho la ley, hecho la trampa. No? So once you have the rating system, you can learn about it. And then, although this is a quantity of steel that was completely unnecessary, and we know a little bit about what.
But it was recycled. It came from recycling.
Yeah, but even
it's
then,
what you
I
said.
mean, all steel
this
is.
only proves that the law is badly, or the way of measuring it, it's wrong. Yeah. It's not working. No.
Actually, there's one thing
yes.
about, and I want Bruno to explain this, because I do think that the Spanish Green Building Council did something very good when they started Verde.
Yeah.
And I want you to explain a little bit the difference
between LEED and...
Because sustainability is very complicated.
Yes, it's very complicated in the sense that for understanding this difference, you should understand that, for instance, LEED is coming from a rating system that is based on a checklist. You just check what you did and what you didn't do, and you give numbers and quotation numbers, and then finally you sum up everything and you have a final number and you say that's that. No? On the moment that we started, about 2002, 2004, mainly people from University of Madrid, they decided that it shouldn't be that simple. So they decided that we should have a rating tool which is much more than just summing up, did you do it good or very good or half good? I mean, so whatever kind of criteria that we are using more or less the same criteria as LEED or BREEAM or whatever, DGNB, all of them. But we are linking that with impacts on the environment in the sense that we don't sum up all these things just like that. We say, look, if you use this kind of material, what is the impact, for instance, on emissions of CO2? What's the impact on fertility of the ground? What's the impact on natural water reserves in the subground? No? The problem is with that you get more numbers and more difficult to understand, becoming too academical. The good thing is that if we are able, but that's the if question, if we are able to bring this methodology or this way of thinking to a political level where decisions can be taken on what's really the impact, not how good are you commercially speaking, I think then we are on a good way. But that's the big problem in this moment, that there is a huge gap between policy making, even though we are trying to do it, we're trying to help them in a certain way or to influence somewhere. But policy making, regulations, and really measuring is two different worlds.
But what I find big pedagogic jump that you do, I mean, you have one action and it has consequences in different fields.
Yes.
I mean, it's not, if we just compare the two schemes, they're both Excels, I think. Indeed, this is LEED, you do something, as Bruno said, checked, so many points, okay. But if you start doing something in Verde, then suddenly the upper line has like 4 different consequences. And that is the hard truth of sustainability. You do something, and at the same time, you cause something positive and maybe something negative at the time. You take an architectonical decision which is complex. Chris? An example. I make a window and on a certain point. That might cause solar heating, which is positive from a certain point of view. And at the same time, it can have its negative consequences. So this is the complexity of just a very simple answer. But something else. I decide to build a parking not underground, but above ground. I use much less concrete, and I can ventilate, and I have daylight in my parking. But I have a big built volume on top of, well, on street level. So this complexity is, it's difficult to manage. And I think that what is a virtue of Verde, that it gets this out in the open, that it shows that if you make one decision, well, you can have, there's a lot of considerations to be, a lot of conclusions to be taken from every decision that we architects make.
Yes, yes. But
yes.
Once again, it is, sometimes I have the impression that we are making the things too complex. And then on a certain moment, Anatxu, when you said that we shouldn't take architecture out of its context, it's very difficult to introduce these kind of things in the formation of an architect from the first year on. I mean, you have to start explaining what is NOx, what is sulfates, what are CO2, and all these things. No? Maybe we should do it. Maybe we should.
Why not?
Yes, but I'm teaching and I'm working on study programs, and I can tell you it's very, very complex.
Well, trying to inform about this is extremely because in order to inform about something, you have to understand it yourself. Otherwise, it's impossible to write about anything. And whenever I've researched on things that have to do with sustainability or bioclimatic, whatever, as I said before, all these names, you find, first of all, you find different associations, all sorts of associations. For example, ASA, Asociación de Arquitectos Sostenible, Arquitectura Sostenible. Then you find the Spain Green Building, and you find, and they all charge different quotes. So, so you think, how can one charge 1,000 and whatever euros per year, and the other one only 60? I mean, who is getting something from this? Who is interested in keeping these associations going? What are they for? Because your idea, my perception, being a journalist and questioning always maybe too much many things, is who is getting a benefit, who is getting profit from it? Because I'm afraid, yeah, many people are. And if you look at Spain Green Building, BRIEM, or whatever you called it, the Consejo Asesor is Ferrovial, SACIR, ARUP, COAM, and you think, something's got to be wrong in here. No? Because, I mean, if it's their own organization, why don't they do it right? No? So, again, this doesn't help. This, I mean, how can you tell the citizens to trust and to help build an education if it seems another joke, another...
We need more labels, eh?
Yeah,
Bruno?
we need more labels, probably, yes. Yeah. Well, first, to put things clear in their place. I mean, nowadays, for instance, in Spain, there are two main associations on national level, which is Green Building Council, España, GBCA, sí. And there's ASA, which is Asociación de Sostenibilidad y Arquitectura. There's another one, which is Spanish Green Building Council or something like that. And you're speaking about that one, which is trying to be representative.
The most
of lead.
expensive, by the way.
The most expensive one, with more or less no activity. GBC, for instance, Green Building Council España, we are paying 70 euros in a year. Yeah. And for instance, the whole Congress, what we're doing that for free. We are not earning money out of that. It's an association without any look for benefits. Okay, you can answer why so many things but someone should make the bridge between what's living in the street and what's happening and policy making, for instance. Someone has to do it. If politics are not seeing it, someone has to do it. Can be done through universities, yes, why not? I have no problem. Can be done through associations. Why not? Can be through just the Chamber of Architects, why not? But they're not doing it. So in that sense, in this sense, at least I can speak from the organization where I'm partially working for, is that we're trying to have a group of about 300 representatives of the society in which industry and enterprises are present, but also universities, also research institutes, individual professionals, and trying to listen to what they say. It's not that easy. Eh? It's sounding very beautiful, but it's not that easy. And we're trying to make progress, maybe not fast enough. And we are very conscious of it. Social aspects, for instance, in all these rating tools are under-present. They are more or less not present in all these things. Why? Because mainly social aspects are not easy to measure. They are quite flying in the air a little bit. And how do you measure if someone in the neighborhood is feeling happy and comfortable with the square they did?
But maybe you do not need to measure them.
Yes, okay.
What you need to do is to agree on what percentage, learn from the health business, learn from the food business. There is a percentage of sugars, of fat, of very concrete things that after that, food or whatever is considered dangerous, is considered fattening, is considered not good for your health. Maybe something as simple as that people could understand. Because, for example, from the citizen's point of view, all of a sudden in Spain, everyone started either buying solar panels for their homes or even investing in solar panels in the middle of the fields. All of a sudden, the government decides to change the law and they are charged for having that after whatever, for the electricity or they get. How can it be trusted? How many more people do you think will go into that, will trust anymore? It's not working.
I always have the hope that people, while learning, will discover that Spanish Green Building Council is not the one to be trusted, and that they select another one. There are a lot of eco labels, and some of them may make more sense, and some of them maybe do not make sense. But I think it's also a process of awareness, creating awareness and erasing some critical attitude, and some will be discarded through the years, I might hope.
Yeah.
We know that FSC is for wood, and we shouldn't use it for anything else. And Verde is for buildings, and some.
Well, pardon, Sander, I would like to give a small answer to what Anatxu was saying before. I think it's interesting to compare with other industries, with other sectors in society, like food or car industry or these things. But and then you can say, okay, food, if you go under that percentage or above that percentage of fat and all those things, it's not healthy, it may not be sold on the market and all those things. They also start measuring before getting conclusions. And these conclusions were turned into laws and regulations. The thing is that in the food market is quite, let's say, simple, because food is composed out of 10 products, basic materials, resource. And then you can do that, and you can simplify the things, you can go fast. If you speak about building or urban planning, things are becoming very, very complex. And in that sense, it's not so easy to start measuring everything, like in the food sector, and making the comparison is not always that direct.
But nothing is simple. No. Each field is complex. And once you have it ordered, some new things appear. For example, now in Spain, compared to the Anglo-Saxon world, now it's compulsory I think it's compulsory to write about allergies. Before it wasn't. Yeah. I don't know if nuts or sugar or gluten, right? And before it was not compulsory. How did they sort it out? Well, they manage, they go. They don't think they have a regulation, a way of doing things. They keep updating their way of doing it. And the good thing, what makes me hopeful if I look at this type of industries, is that 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, you couldn't have imagined that people would stop smoking in bars and restaurants, for example. Or we could not have imagined that we would go to shop again with our own plastic bags or with our own bags. And these habits are social habits that are not, they have proved to be not as difficult to establish. So I think once the message is clear, we are not all stupid as citizens. We know how to deal with, to adapt to new situations. The problem is that it's hard for us to trust if we don't understand, or if we get several messages and we think someone is getting profit because this is our, in Spain more than anywhere else in Europe. Well, no, in Spain. I won't talk about anywhere else in Europe. We are suspicious because we have reasons to be suspicious, right?
I think in Spain we are in building sector over-regulated. We should go to simpler regulation systems. Our own building code is contradictory in itself, mainly about sustainable aspects. So in that sense, there is big work to be done. I wouldn't say that in other sectors things are so well solved neither. I mean, I don't understand why a pot of yogurt from Danone is traveling about 40,000 kilometers in the world before it comes on my table. No? And that's not shown in the eco label of Danone, for instance. So they have to work. There's work to be done for them too. I don't understand why the biggest aluminium enterprise or company is established in Qatar. Meanwhile, they have no bauxite at all, but they have the cheapest oil prices. So if that's a fact, maybe we should say to the automobile industry, look, aluminium is not that environmental, and it's not just enough spending 100 grams CO2 per 100 kilometers to be ecological, for instance. No, it should be 0 instead of 100. It's 100 too much. No? It's not just the consumption. What is saying that you're having an ecological car? It's also the production. That's the opposite of the building sector. In the building sector, they say you have a very good certification lead because when you build it, we could measure everything, but we are not measuring it during the use. The 50 years of use of the building is not measured. So meanwhile, in the car, they say you're ecological when you use only 100 or you emit only 100. So it's not that easy in the sense that we are a very complex world, and the building world more than another one. Now I'm, for instance, in one of the European projects we're working with, is a project on neighborhood development, eco-district renovation. And we are working from bottom to up, not from the institutes to down. And the bottom-up approach is starting with having as much as possible meetings with the neighborhoods, with the neighbors, and asking them just openly in a discussion of 2 hours and a half, what they think that should be better in their neighborhood. Well, all the meetings that we had, none of them was speaking about energy. Nobody. Everybody was speaking about public services, green areas, and infrastructure. Big roads which are cutting connections between neighborhoods and all these things. Nobody about energy, nobody. In the same project, we are working with people from Rotterdam, Copenhagen, Antwerp, and Warsaw. And these other 4 places, they more or less only speak about energy. They are not speaking about green areas because they have them. But they're concerned, or they have a huge energy bill at the end of the month. In Valencia, in our case, energy is not important. So I wonder if we are doing it right, if we should start manipulating a certain way. People say, look, the discussion should go towards energy because that's important. That's what Europe is saying. Or we should just accept it. Or we should say, accept it. Like, maybe it's a fact. I mean, these people, they have only 2 months in the year, a small heating system with a gas bottle. And that's consuming more or less nothing. And they ventilate naturally, and energy is not a problem. If that's the case, then we have a big problem if European regulations are coming to Spain, or at least to the coast, Mediterranean coast of Spain.
If we have to wait for more European regulations to come to Spain, we would always say, okay, just what you said about Sao Paulo, the same thing cannot apply anywhere. So perhaps priorities have to be settled and what goes first, because unless we as a society feel it as something that it's going to have an effect on us, things will not change. As long as we keep portraying this image of an ecological building with Quere building, or with the favelas is not ecological, but with buildings that are made out of sand, out of mud. I mean, okay, this can be ecological, great, but how can we turn our own way of living into a more sustainable one. There are specific laws that I think help not only make a more sustainable city, but also make a more clear message. For example, the laws in Barcelona regarding new hotels and the grey waters, they need to be, that's very clear. You are going to build a new hotel or you are going to remodel this old house into a hotel, you have to go through this. If it doesn't fit, if the tank doesn't fit, you cannot put your hotel in there. Clear. Clear, and it has a very direct effect, right? So I think this is what I miss.
Yes, probably I understand your point in the sense that maybe on this moment, as I don't think it's always, maybe on this moment society needs somewhere more basic guidelines and simple, not...
Or decisions.
Yeah,
I mean,
saying, look,
medicine is
from
not
this on
easy.
you can do it better.
Yes,
that's the minimum.
medicine
You're
is not easy. If you have cancer, you are giving radiotherapy, you are giving, and you can get several other sicknesses, you can get many problems, but decisions are taken to deal with your problem, right? Of course, now some of these decisions may be questioned through the time. Okay, let's not to try to have to question too many things, but let's take decisions, make decisions, because otherwise, I mean, we cannot wait to have everything regulated, because then something else will happen, and then we will have to take this other thing into account.
Maybe the problem is that we, as a society, we are waiting on the political system on taking these decisions, and that shouldn't be. Maybe it's not the only way. Maybe we just, as professionals, you can take decisions by your own too.
And as clients.
As clients, correctly, yes. I decided in my house to recycle grey and dark water, everything. It's not allowed by law. It's the urban regulations don't allow it because you're in urban ground and you have to pour everything to the drainage system of the municipal system. But I installed it. And when I got an inspection, I said, this, let's go to the next point. And I didn't give them the opportunity to speak about it. And it I mean, if you see the amount of water that you recycle with a family of 5, it's about a cube meter of water every day. And that you can pour every week about 5 cubes of water to your garden, which is not drinkable water, it's already consumed water in a certain way. Yeah, then say, look, this is crazy. If you live in a country like Spain where there's a problem of water, why are we not recycling more on a local level, not on a city council level or municipal level or regional level? Because how farther you bring all this water, how more difficult it is to recycle it, how more it is mixed up with oils from the street and all these things, petrol and all these things. If you do it on a local level, it's perfectly possible. It requires some work and all these things. It's not that easy always, but it's possible. And you just have to do it.
I want to come back one moment to when you said that the rating tools are getting very complex and not to be understood. And at times you need these simple examples as you give right now, so that people can start really, in their own life, apply sustainability criteria. No? Now there is some awareness arising in the people, be it because of fashion. People hear about sustainability, they are pro, as long as it doesn't reduce their happiness or their comfort or their luxury. But if people can choose one of the same thing, green or gray, they will choose green, obviously. This awareness, this eco love, can this be a motor rather than the regulations which we are so suspicious of? You are creating a lot of eco-awareness.
Well,
I think.
I don't know, I wouldn't say that, but I think we as a society, as citizens can do that, and I have several examples. For example, I live in Madrid for many years now, and well, we have a very, how would I put it, very extremely conservative government, yes, town hall, to say something. But there was so much pressure from the cycling people that eventually, I don't know because there is no communication, there is lack of communications, but in the last month, many biking stations, as you have here in Barcelona, have been appearing. There's no information, so we wonder if they are going to install a cycling system. Me, as a journalist, have asked the town hall, there's no information, when it's going to start. The other day I read that you will have to pay every time you use it, not as in here, as you do it in here. But anyhow, even to very deaf people who don't want to hear the citizenship, after persisting and trying and insisting and showing them that Madrid is a city that could be cycled, showing that, paralyzing the traffic and things like that. But many, after that, those things have an effect. Yes.
It's hard.
There is a lot that politicians or business or companies will do once you ask for it. Instead of taking the risk of offering it, they will do it once you really ask for it. And perhaps, we are a much more educated society than our generation before here. Perhaps we have a rule there and we have to use it and do something.
I have a question towards the press and the media in a certain way. How far did you experience, or how far do you think you have an instrument in your hands to...
Little far. Okay.
To help these, to help this...
Raise awareness.
Yeah, yes, and giving society somewhere a medium to express.
The truth, yes. The truth is, well, because I work in the cultural section, well, I have some because nobody, my boss tells me you can write about it, or I tell him, can I write about this, whatever. Because cultural section is not considered important in the newspaper. If it was an important section, the main Spanish papers owe a lot of money to the big banks. How can you write whatever you want?
Yeah, but that's the same with the building sector. How can you do whatever we want if we own such a huge amount of the banks?
But you have to try. You have to try on a personal level, on things that can make a little change or open a little door or open a little window to something else, to try something else, or to show how things are done somewhere else that are done better than in our country.
In that sense, me as an architect, and what you said before when we were having lunch is very interesting. I said once you went over the 40 years, you start saying whatever you wanted to say in a certain way without having any problem. I'm criticizing colleagues if they don't do it right in my environment in a certain way. Do you criticize other journalists if they're not writing correctly about these things? Or if you're do you mainly criticize the people who did affect the architecture, for instance?
You can criticize it with your friends, but no. For example, I just showed you a building, a proposal of a building. It's a horrible problem we have in Madrid. It's a museum by Emilio Ambas. I wrote a piece. I investigated this. On the first part, I was not sent there to do this information. Why? Because it was considered local. So someone from Madrid went, and I'm in the cultural section. But because the person who did it, I would say only that he ended up his piece of information, his news, saying, "Gracias, maestro." That's enough for you to have an idea of how much he enjoyed and liked and trusted the architect. Now, because I've known the architect before, because I've met him in Chicago and also in Madrid, because I saw there was something wrong in there, I became suspicious. So I went to the town hall and I found a lot of problems in my investigation, so I thought something's got to be in here, something has got to go. Not only from the sustainable point of view, the vertical gardens, but also very many other problems. Economical, for example, this person was giving money, 5 million euros to build a building, which is by no means enough, and and he was getting 75 years of free use of the building, whereas everyone else is getting 25 years at the most in Madrid. So, but those were numbers. If I had only had this information, this would have gone to the economic part of the diary.
Yeah.
So I have to look for a cultural excuse.
Yeah.
So finally, I tried asking many architects, do you think this building is good? Do you think this building could work with Herzog and de Meuron's Caixa Forum or Tumoneo's Prado? Do you think it's worth that the town hall gives such a good treatment to this person? All the architects would shut up. So what did I do? Eventually, I went outside. I went to William Curtis or many critics from outside Spain, because otherwise they are too scared of losing opportunities. So this is how it works. Unless you really put yourself into it. And of course, instead of taking 2 days or 3 days or a week to write an article, you cannot always take half a month to get all the... That's a problem.
I can imagine that maybe also from the audience there are questions now that you have these two persons at your disposal. Alex Ivancic, he will talk tomorrow on energy.
Thank you very much for your interventions. I mean, really nice to hear your experience and opinions. But I would like to ask you one question to each one. Because, frankly, I expected that Anatxu is going to explain us more from your field. I mean, not like to make critic or of some buildings and spaces, but to explain us how you deal with this. I mean, what's the criteria? What's the metrics you're using to say this Foster is bad and that piano is good or whatever, or that Badia is good?
In terms of sustainability,
yeah,
you're
yeah.
saying?
So what's the criteria? I mean, is it just qualitative, or is there something quantitative in this approach? And for Bruno, a completely opposite question: why to certify? I mean, why?
Shall I answer?
You may start.
Of course, I am in no position to judge how sustainable is the shark that Bruno just showed, the shark, the skyscraper by Renzo Piano in London. I did write about that piece. I went to London. And of course, sustainability was one of the things that were considered, but there were many other factors. However, when do I feel strong enough to write about sustainability in a project? One, if I know it, if it has been shown to me, explained to me, and I understand it, and I can communicate it, or if it's so obvious that it's not working that I question it. Normally, I ask questions to get the information because I don't know about all these things, right? So, to me, it's as I tried to explain when I started talking, something cannot be called bioclimatic if in April, in the north of Spain, it needs air conditioning. There's something wrong in there, just by mixing two words that don't fit together. It cannot be bioclimatic and air conditioned in April, in north of Spain. Doesn't work. So that it gives me an alert, right? Or the Foster city in Masdar that I have not been there. All what I was saying is that it's trying to show as futuristic. I had these slides, but they just didn't work. Of the underground electric system of transportation, but basically nothing was new in there. I mean, as much as I know of architecture, or as little, nothing was new. That's why I try to say shadows, pergolas, and so on. It's a great lesson. That's why I thought this is what has to be said. Okay? Maybe bioclimatic doesn't need to look futuristic. Maybe it needs to look knowledgeable and reliable.
Common sense. When we were preparing the conversations, I also asked you, do you recognize a sustainable building? No. We cannot recognize it at sight. Or do you?
As a matter of fact, if you recognize it, I become
you should
suspicious.
be suspicious. Yeah.
Well,
you can recognize unsustainable buildings. Yeah, this is
But
true.
I would like to give some extra information because I was in Masdar. I went to visit it 2 years ago or something like that. It's in the middle of nowhere, middle of the desert. It's very small. At the end, it's only built the core building, which is the Massachusetts Institute of Technology department in Abu Dhabi. And I took that little car in the garage to go from one building to another.
And they work.
They were brilliant. I mean, it's fantastic in the sense that
They are
you just parked over there and you just enter and things close and you say, I go to this building. And you sit down and there are other cars going around and there are no accidents. I mean, things go very smooth. It goes with electric, with magnetic bands. But it's un capriccio. It's and probably, but I have to recognize that when you enter into that small nucleus which is built by Foster, I think it's about maybe 8 or 9 buildings, nothing more. When you're in that, let's say, public space in between the buildings, it's working in the sense that he is using airflows and evaporation, which is cooling down really the whole thing. Once you enter into the building, it starts becoming a machine with air conditioning and all these things, and people are complaining that too much noise because of technical ground and all this. You say that makes no sense, no? But I think also because it is a building done by Foster, we put in a certain way our criteria of judging much more higher than for someone else. I don't want to defend Masdar, because Masdar is in a certain way a crazy thing, like everything else was done in Doha, in Dubai, and all these cities. No, it's absolutely the extreme part of unsustainability. No? But he, or at least that project, is trying to make real certain kind of investigation with the small cars which are not polluting in a certain way. No? Now, that's just to give you more information the next time if we speak about Masdar. To answer your question, that's a knife that cuts on both sides, in the sense that why do you have to certify a building? I think we had decades in certain ways that sustainability came up and all these things, and that suddenly everybody could say, this is sustainable. Look, my building is sustainable. I mean, there are famous architects putting just a green roof in as a sustainable architecture. To avoid that kind of free use of the word, they invented systems of measuring. And now the knife starts twisting and cutting on the other side. I think if you are able to show to society that there is a neutral association or a neutral institute who is asking for fulfilling certain kind of criteria, and that someone has to show by documents and measures that that's like that, then that neutral association or institute or department has the capacity of saying, look, what he is saying is right. And that's what the certification is doing. He's just saying, look, what you say is right. Now, that's very interesting in the ideal situation, and that's very tricky in the sense that many companies are using all these indicators for doing it right, and many other things to do it wrong, but having a nice certification. So it's nowadays, I agree, it's not because you have the certification that you're amazingly sustainable, but also nowadays you can say that if you fulfill these kind of indicators, that at least you're not just saying, yes, I'm sustainable, no, I'm a green man. So it comes a little bit from there, from if you can have an official document which is checked by a neutral institute, somewhere sustainability can become a little bit more objective. A little bit, yes. But it's not the fault of the system, it's the fault of society in a certain way.
Once we realized Mr. Adelson, who we knew very well from Eurovegas project, he has a LEED certified
Yes.
hotel and casino in Las Vegas.
Yes.
by putting a couple of solar panels and bike parking, then you say, okay, I mean, come on, why should I spend $100,000 to certify LEED or 50,000 for smaller buildings to just to have a label?
Yes.
But in case that I need to have marketing, this is the single reason. It's pure marketing.
Yes.
So that's my position. My position is that certification tools are great, but I'm going to use my certification or recognized certification tool inside the project to check the thing with my things with my client, with my crew, but not to pay for this.
Yes.
I'm not going to pay for this stuff because you said a very interesting thing. Why should we don't have easier procedures? Because food industry, it's something which is standardized. Car industry, it's standardized, and buildings, I mean, are not standardized. So,
but for example, car industry is now being questioned. And food industry as well. Now they are constantly being questioned. For example, the diesel have been proved to cause cancer, and they will be taken from circulation. So things change. You get more information, or you decide to release more information. Maybe you had it.
Yeah, but the process from the industrial side is a bit different because you have one product, and you're going to sell millions of that. So you pay $1 million to certified. You cannot pay $100,000 for each building LEED certificate. No. This is I mean, it's going to be too expensive. Who is going to pay for this?
Right.
Somebody who is going to sell this very well, and there is very few people who is going to pay for this.
Yes. There are certain philosophers who are writing interesting articles about, or books about these things, that how far our economical system, capitalism in a certain way, is really influencing on ecology and natural resources. And that's complete, I mean, then you see immediately the relation. How commercial aspects are most of the times dominating natural resources and how do you manage them and what's the ecological benefit. That's a fact, but that's not the fault of the certification system on itself.
I think those are great tools, really, and very useful tools, but my position is to use them internally and not for marketing.
Yes, even in Verde, in GBC, we are saying use them mainly as a design instrument. Don't look to the
certificate.
Yes, don't. Yeah, okay. It would be interesting.
Sign with them, but don't certificate.
Well, I think it would be interesting to have in Spain a little bit more buildings which are really well built and well done, having them certified. But that's no problem in itself if they're well done. In itself, no problem. But effectively, I mean, in universities, use these rating tools or this set of KPIs to show what are, besides the design aspects, interesting elements of architecture.
I think you said something which I agree. Is the rating tools are very useful as a teaching tool, and we should integrate all this kind of certification tools within the design processes. Have a very recent experience of one project which we have followed most of the, let's say, of the checklists, and we may have a very good certification, but the client decided not to certificate it, just because the building was for their use, so they didn't have to sell it, they didn't have to use it as a marketing tool, but they wanted to use this building for 100 years. So they said, well, I wanted to build it very well, I wanted to have it as sustainable as it can be, but I'm not interested in
that is the building in Leon?
Yeah,
say what it is.
Cerezales del Condado. It's a
foundation.
It's a private foundation, but well, the money that they are using for building for the construction is the same money that they will use in the following years to have their programs, their activities. So the money they spend just, I mean, for the day-to-day use for energy, it's money that they will not be able to use for their real purpose, which is, the cultural story. Well,
That's their
exhibitions,
their cultural
and
objectives.
So their approach is, okay, I want it to be very, very sustainable, but
No,
but I'm not interested in this kind.
Well, in a certain way, it's interesting if you see it from just their inside point of view. It's a certain way, it's a pity of losing the opportunity to show to society that you really, we don't say it just with words, but you can, in a certain way, you have a little bit more stronger arguments of saying, look, effectively, what we did is just not saying, I'm green. No, we can show it in a certain way. I understand that it's always a certain amount of money that you have to spend, and we're trying, at least in GBC, we're trying to lower the prices as much as possible. I mean, for a one-family house or something like that, or a small building, you pay 1,000 euros or something like that, or 800 euros or something. It's not that big amount of money. But
It should be free.
it should be free. That's a point that's on the table. 1 month ago, we were discussing it. It should be free. I put it on the table, but that's a question that goes on. I mean.
Great. More questions?
Well, I only wanted to say that I am also worried about the regulations that you are asking for, Anatxu, because these regulations already exist, and are these private certificates. I think they already exist, but they are private, they are free market now, and they should be now raised up to public things. So public in Europe, public in Spain, and wherever. But I am worried because I think they will remain private for many time. As
business.
Yes, as business, and as everything is being done now. And something which is done from basic now is directly going to private market. So maybe we have to fight from social point of view to try to become this, let's say, convert this into public. And the main motto that you are looking for, I mean, you were saying how to concern people about this. You already have it, is money. It's the only thing to spare resources and energy, water, resources and energy. And it's the only concern that people can understand nowadays. But I think green, the essence of green from ancient times is sparing energy and resources, and it's already there from the most basic home. So everything is already done. It's only to know it. And a last thing, just to say, I'm sorry. Yes, that many of these certificates deal with many parameters, and sometimes they are thought from engineering point of view, and most of us architects feel paralyzed with so many parameters to control, and we are like paralyzed because if we do this, we cannot do that, and this and that. And I think I have to concentrate on the essence, on the basic 2-3 things, basic things that we have to deal, the goals. The goal is to spare energy and resources and leave behind many other things which makes a smog, and we cannot distinguish the main goal, and the main goal is to spare energy, I think.
I'm happy that you make that comment, because I understand the comment that if you just look to indicators, which are mainly calculations, and quite difficult things to understand sometimes, that many architects are not really feeling comfortable with the whole thing and how to use them. No? So recently, we are working on a small project. It's a research project paid by ourselves. I mean, because nobody's paying it. On how do you adapt a small part of the city to reduce the impact of climate change in urban renovation projects. And we have lists of indicators. Hundreds of indicators, okay? And in the office we said, look, what we're not going to do is taking these indicators and trying to apply them on the city. We're not going to say, look, what's the best rate of amount of cars, and then reduce the cars in the city. No? That's a number that you turn into a project, a design. We said, let's do it the other way around. And let's say that intuition, climate change has to do with urban heat island, has to do with air quality, has to do with transport mainly, with energy consumption, with water regulations, flooding control, and all these things. So flooding has to do with making the floor impervious, asphalt and concrete. Urban heat island has to do with asphalt and concrete. Traffic has to do with asphalt and concrete. So simple thoughts in a certain way. And we said, let's take an initial moment of the project, reduce 50% of the asphalt and the concrete in the neighborhood. Okay, 50%. So we took the neighborhoods and we started looking to the surface, and then you can make maybe 10 or 20 designs on where do you reduce asphalt and concrete, and then you're just designing. Depending where you take away concrete and asphalt, you are affecting certain parts of the city. Traffic, green areas, playgrounds, entering to houses, floods, the flooding control and all these things. On that moment, once you have these kind of scenarios of design, and then you do research by design, when you have these design scenarios, then you can go and have a look to these indicators. And then you can start checking these things. If you're really, scientifically speaking, doing something which makes sense or not. But it's the other way around. Not first taking the science and then designing. No, we first designed and then we checked. No? And that was a very interesting moment in the office. And I mean, that's a project that's going on. That will be presented to a European project. No? That's something that we are doing. And I think that's maybe a next step in how to deal with this rating and indicator things and all those things. Instead of just applying them one by one. Say, no, let's first design again, learn out of them, and then see how far are we really fitting and doing it well.
On energy, you can come tomorrow. There will be a very nice discussion on energy between Alex and Chris, and later on also the price of things. I mean, we do not pay for energy what it is worth, and we do not pay for some things what we should pay for them, the famous externalities. No, so come back tomorrow.
I just want to go back more at the beginning when we talked about lies. So just where is the line between hypocrisy and the correct things to do? So because when we start to talk about architecture, we're still talking about business. So, for example, the most sustainable image of architecture we saw was the favela there.
No. I mean, for example, Mazda is sustainable itself. Now, is it a model? How can it be a model if it's a ghetto? It also has a connotations. Nothing is black or white, right? Mazda has many problems. If you associate sustainability with expensive, it's a huge problem because you will have more than half of the population not interested, not even hopeful regarding
this is why
that,
my
right?
question was, where is the line?
Where is the line? Where is the line of ethics? Sometimes there is a line, the legal line, no? With things that have to do with health or with food, again, sorry. But in this particular case, I don't think the law is working towards a more sustainable construction, architecture, or cities, not at all. Why? Interest in something else, lack of knowledge, anything can be in our country, right? In the meantime, perhaps that's why in the beginning I said, perhaps we as society have to be demanding. But of course, we are very plural, we are very many. We have to focus in what we want. We want more sustainable cities, yes, right? Are we willing to walk more, for example? Things as simple as that, because those things everyone understands. And how much are you going to put on your, no, this is something that is beyond me because I cannot put solar panels in my building. No, but there is a lot you can do. There is a lot. What can I do? Okay, do you walk? Why do you have to take your children to school with car? 1 kilometer. Why? Well, it's too cold in the morning. Yes, but maybe they get warm if they walk as well, no? Decisions like that, small decisions. I am a big believer in the small decision making to change big things.
We're almost closing, but I wanted to give also one moment the mic to Warner Phillips, because he knows about brands and he knows about...
Well, I also know a little bit about brands and marketing. I'm also the board chairman of the Cradle to Cradle Institute. And we subscribe to the fact that standards should be public and they should be transparent. And when Cradle to Cradle started over a decade ago, it was owned by two very brilliant and very ambitious entrepreneurs. One was a German chemist called Michael Braungart, and one was the famous American architect Bill McDonough. And but while they were managing that standard, basically owning it and having it as a black box, that wasn't working. So the transparency and the objectivity were not there, and that almost killed the Cradle to Cradle brand. And I'm not sure we're actually going to be successful at reviving it, because the circular economy, which is very related and complementary to Cradle to Cradle, is really taking over the momentum, and we're trying to, jump on that train and ride that. So first of all, I think it's really important that you have standards, that they are objective and they are managed and monitored with all the stakeholders in. The second thing I want to say about it is we're down to version 3 of the Cradle to Cradle protocol, which means that it is a continuous improvement. So every time when we think of a standard, once we establish it as a standard, we will find out that LEED certification tells us a lot about a building, but it might not be the perfect standard for sustainability. So the way it should be set up, in my opinion, is that there is continuous improvement, that as we find out things about the building, that it is included. In that case, actually, in my opinion, the perfect becomes the enemy of the good. If you have a good standard, and I'm not familiar enough with LEED certification, but if you have a good standard, then you should establish it and let people comply with it, and then explain why it is good, but also explain where its vulnerabilities are, and let people talk about that so that you can continuously improve that standard. Now, the last thing I wanted to say is that because sustainability is so complex and it is so overarching, it can be relate to environment, it can relate to biodiversity, it can relate to the humane society, it can relate to one of the big things that's happening right now, a big new trend in the USA, is all about the health and wellness in the built environment. So one of the things that some of these new companies or new initiatives like Delos and other groups are doing is they're trying to incorporate not only how energy or water efficient a building is, but what does it do for the people who are inside of that building. That is sustainability too. So I think from that perspective, it almost makes more sense to have a good standard that is relatively limited, that does not try to capture everything that is sustainability. But maybe some buildings and some ecosystems will be standard or will have certain eco labels related to them that gradually actually will converge. And what we're seeing right now is we've worked very closely with the United States Green Building Council to get cradle-to-cradle products incorporated into the USGBC. So if you now have more cradle-to-cradle certified products in your building, which means they're made with renewable energy, water stewardship, social fairness, material reutilization, and material health as well. That means these are better products, and therefore you will get more points in your USGBC rating, and therefore you'll get higher on the ranking to LEED certification. And I'm not saying that's a perfect model, but what you will be seeing, I think, is that there will be certain standards that are converging and merging together, so that when in 5 or 10 or 50 or 100 years from now, we have one complete standard for sustainability that will say this is sustainable clothing because the dyes that we use for it were not polluting to the water. And those are sustainable water bottles because the plastic is recycled and will be recycled. Then all of those things hopefully one day might merge together. But if we wait until that standard is there, one standard for sustainable, then we're not gonna make it. So we need to make those steps in the meantime.
There are all steps. You should go there. It's an American salesman.
Dutch.
Fifth one.
Just one thing. Wellness is already implicit in good architecture. Wellness, for me.
I don't know if we will get in 100 years to a single standard, but if we do, it has to include another measuring element, which is fair salaries. We cannot think about using sustainable materials if we get them in countries where people are not fairly paid.
Absolutely.
Lately, I heard Zaha Hadid talking about what is happening in Qatar, where they are building a stadium for her. And people are dying by bushes in Qatar, building all the stadiums for the
For the
Mundial,
Mundial.
for the World Cup.
World Cup.
But it was not the responsibility of Mrs. Hadid. She said that this was happening. Okay, now we are architects. We do not own the construction companies, but we should pronounce ourselves on these things. I think. I don't know if anyone else still wants to say something. Yes. And after that, we.
Thank you. Evening all. I think that green seals can bring some benefit to the sector industry. Of course, there is greenwashing. We all know about it. But I would like to go beyond green seals. That is the post-occupancy evaluation of a building. That means post-occupancy evaluation. POE, not Garala. But it means that the evaluation of the building should be done after it has been used. 1 year, 2 years. And this will provide the opportunity to measure the gap between reality and paperwork. So I don't know if you agree with me.
Well, I would like to make a small comment on that. Completely agree, because on this moment, all these green medals and awards that you give, they are just measured on the building just built. I mean, a product that comes out the factory in a certain way. I mean, you give it to society. On that moment, you measure it and you say you're brilliant or just good or you're bad. The day after, when people start using that building, the reality is completely, or most of the time, is completely different. So it would be very interesting, 2 things. To have a system or a methodology or some criteria or a standard or whatever that can say, look, how do we measure sustainability during the use of a building? Another thing should be, how do you control or how do you can use the same market aspects to, I'm not saying punish, but how to rectify something which is used as a commercial value on a certain moment, and 2 years later you see that it's not working, then the market also should be informed that that was a certain way a lie. Okay? And that's something, for instance, that we started 1 month ago with the first building in Spain that was certified by Verde, GBC, and that we're in the process on reviewing if it's effectively like that, if it's working like that, because we have strong indicators that it's not. And in that sense, that's a precedent.
And sorry, and how did you get the indicators? Like, do you check
yes, we
regularly
no,
to the buildings that you have certified?
We cannot check a private property,
so how does it
but
work?
we have the possibility, because the protocol is allowing it, and someone who is certifying is signing the protocol in a certain way. And the protocol is saying that Green Building Council España has the possibility to check the data or the information which was given on paper when the building was finished. We can check on whatever moment if that's really happening or not. The whole proceedings is that you have to ask for a visit, they have to allow that you enter, you have to go and check all the machines and all the installations, you have to check all these things. But on the moment that we see that there's really some kind of misleading of society, GBC has the possibility of saying, look, this certification is not valid anymore. It goes from 5 leaves to 3 leaves, for instance. And then you have the possibility to put that into the media and to the press and say, look, they promise to do it good, and the building is not doing it that well. So that exists. It's possible. We start to do it for the first building. I don't know how it will go. It will be a very difficult process. But I think it's something what is mentioned as a question and very important, because that's the next step.
From the media point of view, that would make the news if it was an important, a famous building.
Well, I will.
That would be
I will
good
inform you when it's it's over there. I mean, it's not that easy, okay? But we decided to start it, and I think we are the first ones in whatever kind of rating system is trying to be honest towards what they promised.
Yeah.
I think this is a good moment, closing this off. You have each other's phone numbers so that when you know that it's going down,
I'll publish it.
and you Anatxu will publish it. Well, I thank you all very much for coming, and I will have to talk. I want to thank everybody over there. Yeah.
Moet het aanzetten.
Hello.
Wow.
So I just want to thank, well, starting with Anatxu and Bruno, for coming over and playing such a nice game. I want to thank everybody here also for bringing in their observations, because the intention really was to have this conversation, which is not, you start with two persons, but the idea is that we end up with everyone. And that is going pretty well for the first session that we are doing. Tomorrow we have 3 more conversations, so I hope that you can come again. We start with Alex and Chris on energy. Then we have another one with Hans Ibelings and Peter Sweetman that is about no more new buildings, the meaning of architecture without new buildings. And the last one, Warner Phillips and Ruud Lubbers will talk about the no-nonsense economy, the circular economy, the efficiency, and how we can make, is there a market to be made out of that? I think in the first conversation, Chris and Alex, we already have to talk about carbon taxes and paying for things what we really should pay, because we are polluting and we're doing that for free. So, think over it at night, and I hope to see you all tomorrow. Thank you very much.